Something unprecedented happened in Ireland on Thursday night. The capital of Ireland, Dublin, plunged into chaos. Riots, arson and unrest overtook Dublin's streets. The visuals on your screens are what happened in Dublin. Buses were burnt, hotels and restaurants were vandalized, and shops were looted. The trigger was a knife attack that left 5 people injured, and it included 3 children. A mob of 500 people protested this knife attack that they claimed was perpetrated by an immigrant. The motive behind this knife attack remains unclear so far. But 34 protesters have been arrested so far. The Irish Prime Minister, Shreya Upadhyaya, and his deputy lashed out at them, saying they are not patriots but haters. Listen in.
This is not who we are, this is not who we want to be, and this is not who we will ever be. These people claim to be defending Irish citizens, yet they put in danger the newest and most vulnerable and most innocent people. Those involved brought shame on Dublin, brought shame on Ireland, and brought shame on their families and themselves. These criminals did not do what they did because they love Ireland. They did not do what they did because they wanted to protect Irish people. They did not do it out of any sense of patriotism, however warped. They did so because they're filled with hate. They love violence, they love chaos, and they love causing pain to others. Looting a shop was more important to them than protecting the lives of our children.
This is not who we are as a people. Ireland has built a modern and inclusive society. It is something precious that we should all work to hold. And we understand the need to respect other, the need to respect difference, and the need to respect the dignity of every human being.
Now, with placards reading "Ireland is full" at the protests, the incident has led to the larger debate of immigration in Europe. Ireland, which was once known for emigration, is now undergoing a transformation. It has become home to a large number of immigrants, with around 20% of its current population born outside the country. This societal and population shift has added to Ireland's already existing challenges, that of crumbling healthcare and the housing problem. Ireland's National Police had this to say after the protests.
This is not a failure of personnel. All members of An Garda Síochána responded to this. Everyone stood up to the plate in terms of their response. I now have to look to the tactics that we have for public order. We have not seen public order situations like this before. This may be behaviour which is apparent in other countries, but I think that we've seen an element of radicalisation. We have seen a group of people who take literally a thimble full of facts and make a bathtub of assumptions, hateful assumptions, and then conduct themselves in a way which is riotous and disruptive to our society. We then have to respond to that in terms of our tactics and training. But there's no failure here. There's no failure. This is regrettably how protests have moved on, and now we have to graduate and have a...
Now, several elections in the past few years have shown that across Western Europe, far-right parties are gaining ground. In the Netherlands, for instance, Geert Wilders has positioned himself strongly for the role of the Prime Minister. Wilders has in the past advocated banning Islamic schools and is also well known in India for his support to BJP's Nupur Sharma over her remarks on Prophet Muhammad. In France, Marine Le Pen scored a record 41.46% in last year's presidential election, and her far-right National Rally went on to win 89 of the 577 seats in the parliament, which is an 11-fold increase from the past. Italy's Giorgia Meloni, another far-right figure, holds the distinction of being Western Europe's first far-right post-war Prime Minister. Despite her party's significant electoral success, Meloni adopted a strategy of normalizing economic policies while also quietly advancing a cultural war agenda. Clearly, the trend reflects a broader shift in the European political landscape. On the show, we talk about the underlying causes of this and its potential implications for the region, with the immigration numbers as well as its opposers rising in Europe. On the broadcast, I'm joined by Dr. Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow at the Manohar Parrikar Institute, and Ambassador Achal Malhotra also joins us. Good evening, namaskar to both of you. Welcome to both of you. Dr. Swasti Rao, I'd like to start with you. You know, these are unprecedented scenes that have come out of Ireland, but you also think that perhaps Europe has shot itself in the foot with the kind of immigration that it has seen, particularly Ireland, because it doesn't come in the Schengen area and it comes under the EU asylum system. Therefore, increasing its challenge already at home, it does face the challenge of a crumbling healthcare and housing problems, basically domestic problems, but it hasn't stopped immigration where it should have.
Right. Yeah, right. Good evening to you, Shreya, and good evening to the co-panelist as well. I think you have already given a very good primer to the problem, and I'm happy that we discussed in the evening about the common asylum law and its costs that the EU countries are bearing. Now, to put it succinctly, I think if I say that European Union is a neoliberal project which has not been able to tackle the problems of either terrorism or the ill effects of multiculturalism, of migration, of identity, and these kind of things. And this is why you see the kind of unrest that you're seeing. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that this migrant problem is a major civil problem for Europe, which, if remains untackled, is going to lead them to the brink of a civil war. The situation is that bad. And the other crises, such as the Ukraine war, etc., and the unending, so to say, price rises when it comes to energy and oil because of the sanctions and this and that, all of this is really adding to this complex problem. But at the heart of Shreya, like we discussed earlier, is the problem of governance, because, like I said, that Ireland is one of those countries in the EU which has the longest waiting period. So what they really need to do is that they really need to bring in legislation through which they can reduce this waiting period, because this is to the tune of sometimes 2 years, and if they really prioritize the cases, it's about 14 months. And these numbers are really, I would say, insane, considering then in that duration, what the refugees or the asylum seekers are supposed to be doing is that they're supposed to be pitching tents wherever they find space, and then there is so much unrest. These kind of unfortunate incidents happen. These incidents are then manipulated a lot, and they often lead to the kind of situations that we have. At least in Ireland, we see something like this. It's not very often that we see something like this. It is very unfortunate, but in the larger Europe, these incidents have been on the rise. And I would say that the European decision makers, the policy makers, and especially those sitting in Brussels, need to take this very, very seriously, because this is a clarion call. I would go to the extent of saying that this is a clarion call. And what is happening there is not good for the future of the European Union, nor for the future of the member states. So I would say this is a problem of governance, and I think the disillusionment that people have from these centrist governments, right, whether it's left of center or right of center, but from these centrist government is very, very evident. France, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, Ireland. And, you will also see that right now these fringe parties, because Ireland is not really supposed to be or counted as a country that has a very strong presence of the far right compared to the countries that you mentioned, like Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, Germany, etc., Hungary or Poland. Yeah. So it doesn't really have that kind of a concentration. But what you will see in due course, and we will all see, is that these kind of incidents are going to lead to better electoral performance of the far right parties, which are right now really at the fringes. So this is what I have to share.
Okay. Ambassador Achal Malhotra, European countries have invited immigrants, have invited more people from the outside. And one of the reasons is the fact that theirs is an aging population and they need the kind of workforce that is required to now push their economies. Europe also has, almost stagnant economies now. They need more workforce, and therefore immigration, was a great way of adding to the workforce of the country. But now perhaps, the leadership of these countries is not able to manage this immigration very well. And the fact that there is a communication gap between the governments of the countries and the citizens, because now over the past several years, there has been a growing dissent against immigrants among the populations of European countries.
Good evening. I think between you and Dr. Swati Rao, you have covered some very good and valid points. What I can add to it is, whatever has happened in Ireland today, it's bound to put focus on a couple of things. One is of course, the issue of migration, and other is the steady rise of and mainstreaming of the far right ideologies in the Western Europe, cutting across the countries. There was a time in the post-Second World War period when migrants were welcome, partly because for various political reasons. I have served in Germany and Austria, and I know that how well they were being treated. But they were also considered an asset to the extent that they were willing to, undertake those kind of menial, jobs, which the natives were not willing to do, and also do at a price which was at a which was maybe 1/5 of the cost of getting it done from the natives. So in a way, they were natives. But over a period of time, the things have become very complex, and we have seen a steady rise of the far right ideology in the Western Europe. And a common element in this far right ideology is anti-immigration, anti-Islam in certain countries, and also anti-European Union. And of late, because of the various reasons, the cost of living is going up, the inflation caused by Russia-Ukraine war, influx of additional flow of migrants, immigrants from Ukraine, whole thing is becoming complicated, and these far right parties have a pretext. They have reasons to project the migrants, the immigrants as the villains, as an object of target, because according to them, they are not only diluting the social fabric of the country, their own cultures, the way they live, but are also becoming an economic burden on the societies. There was when this far right was gaining strength in Austria and Germany, one particular demand, particularly from the Islamic migrant population, was that they must integrate into the European values. What it meant was they must learn the European languages, but they must behave they must think like the Europeans, they must dress up like the Europeans. So what I am afraid of is that beyond a certain point, there is bound to be a backlash, and we have seen some incidents of it already. And this backlash is going to create the real troubles, because there is a point up to which you allow somebody to come, welcome them, and integrate or assimilate into your societies, and now you want them to get out or behave or become a part, get totally submerged into your way of life, is bound to create conflicts. And that's what is a point, to be worried about. As far as Ireland is concerned, in Ireland, in 1 year itself, there has been a tremendous increase in the number of refugees. Numerically, it may not be very, very high. They have about 80,000 refugees at this point of time. But there were only 9,500 1 year ago. So more than 700% increase in 1 year. So, the whole issue has then therefore to be seen in two
this year, Ireland
contexts.
has seen a 16-year high in the number of immigrants.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. In 1 year, from 9,500, the figures have gone to 81,000 in 1 year. So, and this This might go up. And as compared to previous year, it was only 5%. So you see, as this is this is bound to create conditions of conflict, and the far right parties are likely to exploit this situation. Particularly if the economy is not doing well, you need somebody to target. For this aspect is also very important because there are for various reasons, the economic opportunities are on the downtrend. There is a inflation. So you have to hold somebody responsible. And when they argue it this way, they have a popular appeal. And that's why they are getting votes. And you mentioned about the Dutch elections only the other day. See the results. 37 seats is about to form the government there. And 25 years ago, when something like this happened in Austria, when they formed a minority government, the far rightist, the shockwaves went through the entire Europe. But then, since then, there has been a steady increase in their presence, in their vote banks, in their, role in the governance. So this is an ongoing process, but heading towards, in my opinion, a situation which may have serious consequences in terms of social conflicts. Over to you.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Swasti Rao, we keep talking about the fact that Europe is now seeing an emergence and a spread of the far right ideology, and we can see it election after election where far right leaning parties are gaining more and more ground. But just to help our viewers understand and simplify for them, what are the similarities and the differences between what we understand as far right here in India and what perhaps is understood in Europe? How are the two similar and how are the two different?
Okay. Okay, all right. So Shreya, so putting it very, very simply for the viewers, is that, of course, there are certain similarities, which is that, what is the far right? Far right is that, the extreme conservatives, right, who would say that it's the identity, which is very important. It is the traditional values which are important. And if you want to have a sense of what is meant by far right in Europe, I think you can just listen to the speeches of either Marine Le Pen in France or Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And you've seen that whenever they stand up and there is a certain kind of a pattern which is repeated again and again, which is that I am a mother, I'm an Italian, I'm Christian, etc., etc. I'm a woman, so I believe in family values, etc. So those are things which are, I would say, that centrality of religion, the Christian values, the European values, the identity. I think I would not go to the extent of calling it white supremacists, but yes, because the ethnic European identity is so crucial there, so that is also there. Now, with respect to the similarity that you can draw with India, and not just with India, but with any populist party otherwise, is that you have to understand that the hallmark of populism, so just by virtue of standing up for traditional values, you don't become a populist. What actually makes you a populist also is an added ingredient. Now, what is that added ingredient? That added ingredient is the subversion of elected representatives, of the rule of law, the rule of, the role of institutions, etc. So a common narrative of the populist leaders across the board is that everything is elitist. These elitist decisions are not really reflecting the problems of the common man, and therefore these things need a structural change. And therefore you will see that all these far-right populist leaders, of course identity is one, but the other thing is this disillusionment that they are very, very successful at establishing in the common person's mind that their problems are not really reflected by all these elitist, so to say, practitioners who are sitting in their air-conditioned offices and who are not really bothered about how the energy prices are going up, how the common European doesn't feel at home in his own country because it sees this influx of, migrants, etc. So those are basically, by and large, to do some similarities and differences. But I'd like to tell you something, again, very important. And I think it's important to understand that also. The refugee crisis peaked in Europe in about 2015, 2016. And Ambassador, Malhotra would also agree that this started happening after the Arab Spring. that started in 2011, and the North Africa and the Middle East, that region, millions of refugees started to flee. And because the affluent Muslim countries would never take them in, whether Dubai, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, any of them, they would not take them. So they would go directly to Europe. They would cross the Mediterranean and go to Europe. Okay. Now, the thing is, and this is where I tell you where this is a failure of governance. And I really would urge the European Union, especially those sitting at Brussels, to take note of it. So there was a migrant crisis that had peaked during 2015 to 2016. Now we are almost 1 decade from there. And the failure lies, and that is the structural failure, why this entire thing is crumbling today, is that they could not come up with a common asylum law. So whatever they came up with had so many defects that the 27 member countries would not agree to it. They had a Dublin regulation. They went on reforming the Dublin regulation, Dublin 1, Dublin 2, Dublin 3. Ultimately, they did away with it. Then they brought a quota system. The quota system didn't work because Viktor Orban in Hungary and Poland, those governments said that we are going to have zero immigration, etc. Then now in June 2023, this year, okay, this is very, very recent. Now they have come up with, again, some sort of a formula. But the loophole in this formula, again, Shreya, is that, if there is a country that does not, is not really willing to take in an asylum seeker, you know what that country can do? That country can buy itself out of that situation. That country can pay 20,000 euros per head to not, accept that asylum seeker. Now, what will happen because of this is that the richer country of the European spectrum are likely to buy themselves out of this headache because, yes, the fact is that in 2023, this is a problem which is becoming an endemic problem, in European societies. So, again, this is going to have this load on countries that are relatively poorer, the countries that are relatively, the first point of contact. And that is how the problem has grown in such massive proportions. And one of the outcomes of this problem is what you see, like kind of a collateral, is what you see when you see the right-wing populist parties rising. So this is just a collateral. The thing is, the stage is set. And anybody that sees this kind of a stage would come and try to do what the far-right parties are doing. So in that regard, it is a failure of the EU governance. And that is why I'm again and again pointing out, at that point, again and again, that it is very easy, for all the, like, for example, the prime ministers and everybody to stand up and say that these rioters are not patriots. Of course, they are not patriots. But the point is that being the prime minister of the country, what really have they done to actually reduce the complexity around such legislations, right? Why are they not reducing the waiting times? If they cannot reduce the wait times, they should try and turn them away so that they can go to some other country rather than being there. I told you that in May this year, the people were so angry with all this that they had actually burnt down their tents, okay? So this is a situation where somewhere knowingly, wittingly, unwittingly, the decision makers, the policy makers are actually pushing the populations. And that is why I'm saying that it's a ticking time bomb. Back to you, Shreya.
Okay. Ambassador Malhotra, can we then say that this emergence of the far right is perhaps out of the fear in the minds of the citizens, in the minds of the population of these countries, and the fight for survival? Because, more and more people coming into their country, using their resources, taking up their jobs, all of that fear setting in. And therefore, the far right coming in as the so-called savior of the people who will make sure that the citizen comes first, that their land is protected from outsiders. And therefore, we see the kind of emergence of the far right ideology that we are seeing in Europe.
Yes, I think it is a very big contributory factor because the argument that the far right is using against the immigrants is that they are encroaching upon, the legitimate resources and of the natives. One of the arguments they give, so much of money is being spent unnecessarily on their social welfare, and they are going to the extent of accusing the governments of being discriminatory against the natives. And so therefore, and as I said, if the country is prosperous, nobody minds. But the moment there are economic difficulties, the cost of living is going up, you also start getting, carried away by these arguments. And of course, there is some lack of trust or confidence in the mainstream ruling parties also, which also contributes to the rise of our right. But how far is this going to? And there's one more point I wanted to make was that I'm not really sure whether a common asylum law or some very, very effective rules and regulations about absorbing, assimilating the migrant population is going to help. Because at the end of the day, the social divide, unless they really assimilate or really merge into the country of their migration, this social divide is not going to go. And that always will flare up at some point of time. Particularly from the Islamic world, the Muslims are never going to let their identity be diluted. Like when I was in Germany, the demands on them was, I'll narrate you if you have time, a very small incident. The moment there was a demand on them to integrate into into the Austrian society, from that day onwards, we began to see every weekend, the Muslims began to appear in the markets dressed in the Muslim attire, which was not there because they wanted to assert their identity, because they were being asked to change their identity. So this social conflict is going to remain forever. And now this again will be in conflict with the concept of mobility of people, which we talk about. So I think there's no simple
Yeah, but then
and
Ambassador
easy
Malhotra, what
answer
is the
to.
way forward? What's the right way of going ahead with it? I know there's no easy answer, but what's the right way? In identity versus identity, do you adopt the identity and the value system of the country that you're living in and lose your original identity, or do you still go ahead with what you were born as and what you have grown up and lived with?
I think I mean, it may sound a little this thing, but ultimately, if we can learn not only a life of mutual accommodation or a tolerance, rather respect for each other's identity, and learn to live in harmony and peace, that probably is the answer. Now, in India, for example, we don't have a migration problem. Our problem is again of minorities versus the majority of late, which is being played up also very much. So here, there's no question. There are in several ways minorities are already assimilated into the Indian society. So the question is not of they keep saying that we must learn how to live or how to be tolerant of each other. I think no, tolerance is not important. Tolerance is negative. You have to have mutual respect for each other. Okay, you live the way you want, but don't become a problem for me. Your freedom of expression, for example, you may say whatever you want to say, but you can't hurt my sentiments. So that kind of social condition. So we need a social reform,
Okay.
not a legislative reform, to bring in a society which is, mutually accommodative of different religions, different,
Okay.
social behaviors, different thoughts. But it may sound a little,
Yeah.
utopian, but I think this is how it is. Over to you.
Okay, last word to you, Dr. Swasti Rao. How do you see this moving forward now, with Europe caught in this value system versus value system conflict, immigration challenge, the numbers increasing every day? Quickly, if you could just share your thoughts on how you see this really panning, forward, and the leadership really dealing with this.
Yes. So I think just the key takeaway. So the point is not that like we are all, I think, agreeing to, is that there is no easy solution and there's no total solution to this. But there are ways in which you can reduce and you can manage it a little better. That's one. The other thing is that I think Europe would really have to sort of, and I think that this is what the respective governments are doing. I think there's also relatively more acceptance of the fact that there would be a rise of the right wing, the way we are seeing in Europe, because until a few years ago, this was looked upon as something which would create an identity problem for the neoliberal European logic, right? I see that there has been a shift there as well.
Okay.
In the sense that, for example, look at Netherlands. Now, Wilders is leading, and he would need to make a coalition government out there, right? And then now you see that there are coalition partners who are ready for it because they understand that there's a certain number of people who want somebody like him, at the apex positions. So there will be better understanding. And I think that just the last point, Shreya, which is an important thing, is that I think it will also give the opportunity of governance to the right-wing populist leaders. And I think it will be interesting to see how then they govern when they are in that line of fire, you know, in many ways. So I would be interested to see how would they govern, because now they will have to now act and not just criticize.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. Dr. Swasti Rao and Ambassador Achal Malhotra, thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now and sharing your perspective on this chaos that not just Dublin, but the entire European continent is seeing. Well, that's it on Beyond the Headline tonight, but news and updates will continue on Mirror Now. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Bye-bye and good night.